Absolutely. Angels, Orange County Register beat writer and author of the new book, Sho-Time, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played, published through Diversion Books. Jeff, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
It's a really impressive book that you got out. I'm fascinated by the story of how you got it out. It comes out this month. But you had some starts and stops along the way. This wasn't a straight through, I'm going to write it. Can you tell us the backstory of how Sho-Time came about?
Yeah, well, in 2018 was when Ohtani first debuted in the major leagues, and it was pretty apparent pretty quickly that he was actually able to do this two-way thing that nobody had done in 100 years. And so at that point, the book project began to write a book about his first season in the major leagues. And I got about a quarter of the way through it. And then in June, he blew out his elbow and couldn't pitch anymore, and the project was tabled. And the publisher at the time said, let's, see what happens when he pitches again, and we'll talk about it again. Well, he didn't pitch in 2019. Nothing happened. 2020, he came back and pitched a little bit and got hurt again, and it was terrible, and nothing happened. So I kind of figured it was dead. And then 2021, all of a sudden, he's incredible again. And now, the project was revived, and at the end of the season, I put together, what I had written before, and I added a whole bunch to it just on the season itself and some other little sidebars I went off to about Babe Ruth and other two-way players and like the Negro Leagues, and threw it all together over the winter.
Sometimes things happen for a reason. You now have this book coming out on the 19th when he is at the top of his game. He is having another incredible season. What is it like for you to watch him on a day-to-day basis? And does it ever get tiring?
Well, first of all, I want to say I feel pretty fortunate that he has done this, because there were certainly no guarantees when the season began that he was going to do it again, because he didn't do it in his first 3 years in the major leagues, have that kind of season. So I was a little nervous that between writing the book and people reading the book that he was going to get hurt or slump or whatever. So thankfully that did not happen, and he's great again. And I do feel very lucky to be able to see what he's doing, and I try not to take it for granted, try to appreciate, how incredible it is to see a guy who's legitimately one of the top starting pitchers in the game and can throw 101 miles an hour, and then he comes out and he hits a 450-foot homer. So it's pretty incredible.
You go back on the journey of how Shohei got here, his upbringing in Japan, and how focused he was on baseball from an early age, including listing his baseball goals. Can you talk about his development and focus since he was a very young child?
Yeah, he's pretty much always been committed to being a great Major League Baseball player. And he made this list in high school. His coach had the players all do like lists of their goals for the future, and he had this very specific plan that he wrote about what age he was going to get to the major leagues and what age he was going to pitch his first no-hitter and when he was going to win his, Cy Young Award in the major leagues, and et cetera, et cetera. And at the time, he was really just thought he was going to be a pitcher in the major leagues. It's what all his goal was. And then it really shifted when the Nippon Am Fighters, in order to convince him to actually start his career in Japan and not go straight to the minor leagues in the U.S., said, hey, you can be a two-way player if you do this. And then I think that was really what kind of started that whole part of his journey. And obviously it worked out pretty well.
Well, and it wasn't just the expectations he had for himself. That obviously built up the expectations for the people over there. And can you talk about, you mentioned other athletes, two-way players you covered. He was known as the Babe Ruth of Japan. What was the expectations and pressure on him coming over to play here for the Angels?
You mean in Japan? The expectations there or over here?
Over here in the States. Once he came over, what was that like? And was there more pressure over there to play in front of the home fans than there was to come over here and do it on the big stage for what people would consider the majors?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that over there, they loved what he did, and they, there's a lot of pride in Japanese players that they want to see them come succeed in the major leagues. So I'm sure there were a lot of people in Japan that were rooting very hard for him and really did not want to see him fail because they had loved what he did in Japan so much. And as far as over here, I think there was a lot of skepticism that he could really do it just because nobody had done it in 100 years. And, the major leagues are a better league than Japan, and it's harder to do anything, let alone something that nobody else has done. And his first spring training in 2018, he was really not very good at all. So I think that just added to all the questions. And he just really kind of flipped the switch. He made some mechanical adjustments. He needed to learn a little about the players he was facing, and he really was pretty incredible how he put those fears to rest pretty much once the 2018 season started. And then after that, it was just a matter of staying healthy, and it took him a little while to get back to that.
You know, like a lot of people who write books on athletes, you didn't have a ton of help from the subject. What did you learn most from the people around him about Shohei Ohtani and what kind of person he is?
Yeah, I think what you really learn is that he is very single-minded and committed to baseball, and that's really all he wants to do is just be the best baseball player he can be. But he is not. That's not to say that he's some robot that just goes to the ballpark and then goes to sleep in his little cone or whatever and then comes back. He's a really lighthearted guy. He's got a great personality. He jokes around with his teammates a lot. He jokes around with the media sometimes. You can see him on the field kind of joke around with the other players who speak English and Spanish, and certainly nobody else who speaks Japanese. But he's really has a good time, living this life that he's living. He's really enjoying it to the fullest, I think.
One of the people you talked to who wrote the foreword for the book was Joe Madden, who talked about how important taking the shackles off was as a huge part of his success, despite some of the early struggles. Can you talk more about how no one really got in the way of his success? Because, in the era of pitch counts and other limitations placed on athletes, it seems like Shohei kind of got the ability to follow that path.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was no blueprint for how a two-way player was supposed to function in the major leagues in 2018. So what the Angels were doing was they gave him a lot of days off. Like the day before he pitched and after he pitched, he didn't hit. He didn't hit the same day that he pitched. And all of this was because they really wanted to keep him strong and keep him from getting injured and maximize his performance. Well, that didn't really work because he still got injured and he still had some struggles of performance. And so after 3 years of that, finally, before the 2021 season, it helped with a new general manager, Perry Manasian, came in. And between him and Shohei and Joe Madden, they kind of said, look, let's just forget all that. Let's just play. Let's just play baseball like we did in Little League. You go play. You're gonna hit and you're gonna pitch and you're gonna do it every day unless you tell us that you need a break. And let's just see how that goes. And it just sort of started working, and they didn't stop it all year. And it was a pretty remarkable thing.
You talk about some of the struggles. He's somebody who hasn't had a straight line to success, despite his amazing success between injuries and struggles. In the book, you talk about his ability to adjust and make tweaks, citing different times along the way. Can you talk about his ability as an athlete to make adjustments that make him better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a thing that I hope a lot of people get out of the book is that, a lot of people knew he was this superstar in Japan, and then he came to the United States and ended up being a superstar here. But like you said, there was a big roller coaster, and, he made a really big adjustment in 2018 right away when the season started, where he had this big leg kick in Japan, and it just wasn't working against major league caliber pitchers. He could not get his timing right. So pretty much a couple days before the season, the hitting coach said, why don't you just dump the leg kick? And he basically just at the drop of a hat just changed his swing dramatically and started hitting. And a lot of other players looked at that and just could not believe that you could make that significant of a change on a dime, which he did. And then, another thing that you can look at is in 2021, when he started out the season, he was walking a lot of guys. He wasn't able to get deep in games because his pitch count was getting high. So all of a sudden, he just continued kind of refining his mechanics a little bit. He added a cutter, which is a pitch that's just good for getting, quick outs, get soft contact. And all of a sudden the walks just disappeared. He was getting deeper into the games. His 100 pitches were getting him 6 or 7 innings instead of 4 or 5 innings. And all this was just, an improvement as he went. And then this season, he's even gotten still better. He's been able to throw with higher velocity and still throw strikes. He's been able to, his slider has gotten a lot better this year. So now between the splitter and the slider, he has these 2 wipeout pitches. So if he gets ahead, hitters are in big trouble. So he has continued to evolve all along. It's not just some, incredible raw talent. It's incredible raw talent plus, an ability to adjust and learn.
You're watching a player that isn't just good on both sides of the ball. This is a guy, as you just said, who throws 100 miles an hour and at the same time can launch a ball out of any ballpark with relative ease. And I've heard you say that there's no precedent for this. How long do you think that he can continue to do this? And is there concern in baseball, or at least in the Angels organization, about how long they can let him do this without risking his health?
That's a great question, and I have no idea what the answer is. I don't think he's going to do this for 10 years. Like a normal, one-way pitcher or DH, at his age, you would think that would be possible, but I don't know if he's going to make it that long. So how long is he going to make it? Is it going to be another 2 years, 5 years, 6 years? We have no idea, just because it's never happened. Even Babe Ruth only did it for 2 years, really, and then he was kind of done with it. He just wanted to hit. So we really don't know, and that's why I think his next contract, he's a free agent after 23, is going to be fascinating to see how somebody structures a deal for him when there's really so many questions about his future.
If he had to make a choice, which one do you think he would choose, pitching or hitting?
He's been asked that a lot before, and he never really answers because he really likes doing both. And I think he's better when he does both, because in the 2019 and 2020 seasons when he didn't pitch, a lot of people said, think of what a better hitter he'll be when he's not worrying about pitching, but he was actually worse. So I think he needs that balance. So he certainly has not shown any interest in choosing one or the other. I think he's better as a pitcher. He's just been more consistent. Injury is the only thing that's ever stopped him as a pitcher, whereas as a hitter, he does go through slumps, for a month or so where he's pulling the ball a little too much, striking out too much, swinging out of the zone a little bit. He doesn't really have those problems as a pitcher, so I think he's better as a pitcher.
Jeff and I have talked a lot about, when the Phillies athletes have struggles and they're coming up, the lack of patience at times with some of the struggles, the position changes, what's a perceived lack of confidence. The Angels never really had a doubt with Shohei. Can you talk about the confidence they had from the start, not sending him to the minors?
Well, they had a lot of they basically felt like he'd performed for 5 years in the second best league in the world in Japan. So they were willing to let that supersede what they had seen in 6 weeks of spring training. And then once he did it, then certainly there was no reason to doubt him. And then after that, it was just a question of health. And I do think, though, that there were some doubts coming into 21, just because 2020 had been such a disaster for him, that I think that, when they started in 2020, he actually started taking some fly balls in the outfield and some ground balls at first base, just in case, the pitching never came back. But I do think going into 2021, there was some skepticism, even within the Angels, that he really could do it. And I think that was part of the reason that they were willing to kind of put the pedal to the metal as far as letting him play and taking the restrictions off, to just sort of, let's just see what he can do. And, if he fails, then, we gave it our best shot and we'll try something else. And obviously it worked and they didn't have to do that.
The one thing that Ohtani appears not to want to do is he's not participating in the home run derby. Why do you think it is that this year he decided that he didn't want to participate in it?
Well, he hasn't told us that yet, but it has something to do with just, the fatigue. Last year he was pretty exhausted and he only did one round. And then he was the starting pitcher the next day. So I think that he would probably like to be the starting pitcher again this year. And I think that Major League Baseball probably would like that too for the ratings. So, he's done the Derby. He gave everybody the look at what that looked like, and he had the experience of it. And I think it's probably just, he'd be better off just kind of resting for the day and then put on the show in the actual game on Tuesday.
So with the game coming up, I just wanted to ask you one more question before we let you go, not book related. Jeff and I talk a lot about the MLB rule changes. You're somebody who's watched baseball for 25 years. Looks like we're heading to a pitch clock, potentially robo balls and strikes. Now this week I see the pie rule for the shift. Your thoughts on some of the rules changes in the state of baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Baseball's biggest problem really is the strikeouts and the lack of action. I think that's the biggest thing that they need to address. All these other things, the shift, I don't know that that's really going to make too much of a difference. The pitch clock is nice. It's going to speed the games up a little bit, but I think what we really need to do is figure out a way to get the ball in play more and not have so many strikeouts and walks. And I don't know that they've really come up with the right answer for that. I mean, I think one of the possible things is it would take a few years is to have less pitchers on the roster. So the pitchers more have to pitch to contact to get through multiple innings instead of just coming out for one inning, 15 pitches, pitching like your hair's on fire and striking everybody out, and somebody else comes in the next inning. I think that's something that we don't necessarily want to see. I'd rather see a guy come in, have to throw 2 or 3 innings and get some ground balls and let the fielders work, and it's just a more entertaining game. So that's the change I would like to see. These other changes that have happened, they don't really bother me. I don't think they're going to really make a huge difference in the way the game looks.
Oh, we will see if baseball follows your lead. The book, again, is Sho-Time, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. Jeff, best of luck with the book. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk about it with us, and we hope we get to talk to you again one day.
All right, cool. Thanks for having me.
You have a great one.